So welcome back to the archives. We've been making art over here the last couple weeks. So this was the first week. I've been facilitated 3 weeks. The first 3 weeks I proposed the workshop series because I thought it would be good to get some stuff in our homes that we can show folks how to, do some interior decorating in their units but at a affordable rate, but stuff you can get from the dollar store. So the first week we did black and white art. This is the one I did. You could do freehand. We also had stencils. So this is a stencil that I used. The second week, what did we do? Oh, we made coasters. I could show you what mine look like. So the second week we did coasters, DIY coaster and trays. We used marble contact paper, right? Again, just from the dollar store, marble paper, the fake marble. And this was what I ended up doing. It's hung up on my wall. The third week I facilitated, we learned how to repurpose furniture. So I repaint, sanded these down, just crates that we had gotten, and just, you can get furniture and repurpose it, put some primer, put some color on there. It pops. Mine, I painted my furniture green. A lot of my stuff was donated from the furniture bank, and they were all different colored woods. I just painted everything the same color. So the table, the bookshelf, I repainted a ladder I have that I use for my towels. So just stuff that I either donated or found from the side of the road that people are giving away to recycle or throw out. You have to be careful with that because you don't want to be bringing bed bugs. If somebody threw it away because it had bed bugs, you don't want to be bringing bed bugs into your house, right? So you have to be really careful. But this was the third week. The fourth week, last week, one of my neighbors facilitated, which was great. We did straw painting, and we basically, where you blow it. I came home, and when it dried, I painted my design patterns over it. But I was working with the red, yellow, and green, the Ghana colors, the Black Liberation colors. So this was the one I did week 4. So, and since I'm starting art, I will also show, I mentioned that I want to get a tattoo. And I think in it, I drew a mermaid in 2017 that I have framed. So this is the mermaid I did in 2017. And I want to use the mermaid tail here, and see how I already started with the afro, but now I've remixed it where I want this to be her head. So I have to bring these two together somehow. So I started doing Medusa with the snake afro. So I want it to be Medusa's head with the kente mermaid tail. So that's the tattoo I really want next. And I bring that up because we're returning to The Conjuring of America, Mojo's Mermaids, Medicine, and 400 Years of Black Women's Magic by Dr. Lindsey Stewart. So I've been reading about mermaids, actually, in this section. I wanted to share a little bit of what I've been reading about mermaids. So remember the last time I was telling you how mermaids were being worship, basically. I don't know if worship would be the word, but for divinations, some of the voodoo queens like Marie Laveau and Juliet and the other women, they got moved underground, but they were still worshiping mermaids, and it was so scary to the powers that be that they would send the police in to confiscate the mermaids, right? It was said that there's a lot of feminine mysteries that they contemplated at these women-only meetings. So these were women-only meetings. There was a raid. So on page 66, it says, in the 19th century, this is chapter 8. Chapter 8 is called Mermaid History. So it talks about how in the 19th century, the worship of mermaids in Black communities spanned from the Gulf and lower East Coast, from New Orleans all the way to South Carolina. Mermaids were especially venerated by the Gullah Geechee people. They were descendants of the Yoruba, the Igbo, Senegambians, Ivumbundu, who had been kidnapped for their labor and expert knowledge of rice and indigo production. So the Gullah Geechee veneration of mermaids was really important within that community. And it talks about how There was a Gullah Geechee folktale about a mermaid who caused a rebellion in the 1850s, which is about the same time of the voodoo raids that were being increased in New Orleans. And so the story is a really beautiful story. I'm going to leave you to read the book to find out what that story is, because obviously you don't want to give everything away, right? But it's a really, really powerful story about a mermaid that was captured. She goes on to talk about Conjure Fueling Rebellion, which is why they made us think that like Conjure was so demonic and bad and evil, is because it was often used in rebellions. So on page 75, it talks about how slave owners knew there was an intimate connection between the practice of conjure and the rebelliousness of the enslaved. Frederick Douglas was one of the most famous ex-slaves who led the abolitionist struggle. He was said to carry conjure root when he successfully fought off a slave owner who tried to whip him. Harriet Tubman, who helped hundreds of slaves escape along the Underground Railroad, is known for her healing knowledge of herbs, roots, and her spiritual visions. And then many large-scale slave revolts in the United States were fueled by conjure. From 1712 slave revolt in New York and the 1742 slave revolt on the slave ship the Jolly Batchelor, to one led by Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner in 1822 and 1831. Those rebellions were led, they drew inspiration from practices in conjure, such as visions and prophecy, plants and root work, oaths and spells. Okay, so the fear of American enslavers regarding conjure and rebelliousness was not fully realized in a revolt that took place off the United States soil, which was the Haitian Revolution. Remember, the success of the Haitian Revolution at the turn of the 19th century sent shockwaves through Western civilization that still reverberate today. The United States saw Haitian voodoo as a political threat, right? Which is why you see in politics, specifically Donald Trump, there was an attack on Haitians. It's because the Haitian community, their association with Haitian voodoo is seen as a political threat, right? You people use this thing to start a revolution that cost us a lot of money, even though they got their money back. So she talks about that. Those who fled Haiti during the revolution brought their gods with them to New Orleans in 1809. Again, you see New Orleans in the state, the way they were going so hard at the black communities in New Orleans. These are places where there were heavy slave revolts, heavy use of conjure. But anyways, the chapter goes and talks about the influence of the Haitian in New Orleans at the beginning of the 19th century, how it strengthened its legacy of insurrection. Along the German coast were maroon camps. Maroon camps were settlements established by runaway enslaved people where the inhabitants still remembered Saint Malo, who was a fearless leader who led the struggle of slave rebellions in 1784. Saint Malo's memory was preserved through New Orleans voodoo for the following century. And he's worshipped as Saint Maroon, who's a patron saint of enslaved runaways. And so this is what the chapter kind of goes into, basically similar to Negro Mammies. Voodoo queens were doing something similar. They knew how much roots, barks, flowers to administer to get the results that they wanted. I was watching today, Remedy is a series, Ancient Medicine for a Modern Illness. And so every day for the last 8 days, we've been getting an episode. Today's episode that I just watched was on cancer, reversing the most dreaded disease of our time. And it was talking about integrative medicine, but looking more at the plant-based medicines to kind of help prevent cancer and or not cure cancer, but help mitigate some of the risks, some of the side effects that might come with like doing chemotherapy. And talk about traditional Chinese medicine. But like, I didn't see a whole lot of black people, I don't know, right, in there. But sometimes we forget that like black enslaved Africans, we also have similar herbs, and we do a lot of this work as well too. And that's what the work of nanny midwives and voodoo queens, right? Marie Laveau came really popular because she was helping to cure and heal folks who had yellow fever, right? That was what brought her into prominence. Yellow fever struck, people were going to the doctors, Western doctors were doing bloodletting where they would like release blood, which was not working because they were releasing fluids which people needed. And it was the enslaved Africans that were like, girl, you can go to see those doctors if you want, but like, our homegirl over here in the country, the Negro Mammy, those voodoo queens, they know. Marie Laveau, she's healing folks from yellow fever, and basically she was using roots, right? Going back to Oshun, the root, the herbs, and the water. She was giving them fluids, not draining them of fluids. So that's how she became popular, right? So just please don't forget that Black folks also do this type of healing work with herbs and herbal medicine. And in fact, they were doing this for a lot of white communities. And I see a lot of white folks in this series doing incredible work around herbalism. But there's not always a lot of acknowledgement. Well, this one they were like traditional Chinese medicine, right? But I don't really hear often a lot of white people attributing their knowledge of herbalism to enslaved Africans, specifically those in the United States, right? But we know that there were Negro mammies and they worked with white folks. Again, going back to the story of Vicks Vapor Rub, remember? Book basically talks about New Orleans, and it was unique because it had French, Spanish, and American colonization, right? And each brand brought its own uniqueness. The French brought Code Noir. The Spanish had, what was the Spanish one called? Something Negro. Well, let me see if I can find it here. The Spanish had Código Negro, right? So these were all under Spanish rule in New Orleans. Basically, many of the enslaved can manage some wealth. They can acquire some wealth. So the Spanish were the most lenient, or the most allowed the enslaved people to be the most free. But obviously, all of it was trash, right? So the story goes into more of that kind of a history as well too. And then it returns to Oshun, but also now connecting Oshun with Mami Wata. When it comes to Mami Wata, for sure, there's a lot of respect there, right? And so the chapter talks about Mami Wata and how it's an amalgamation of a bunch of different, how we know her to be right now. It's an amalgamation of a bunch of different African deities and cultures. So basically, Oshun has become really popular among enslaved Africans who went to Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, New Orleans, and New Orleans is considered the northernmost part of the Caribbean. During the 16th century, Oshun merged with other water spirits that Africans brought with them to the Caribbean. There was a Simbi from the Congo, and they support, protect, and preserve social order in communities that honor them. The Simbi were believed to live in watery domains such as streams, rivers, lagoons, springs, waterfalls, marshes, and whirlpools. And in Congolese mythology, they took the forms of persons, mermaids, pythons, calabashes, aquatic plants, parrots, and insects that live in or near water, such as mosquitoes. Most often they were depicted as snakes. And so it also takes influence from the fawn of the Dahomey. And so basically Mami Wata is a comforting and fierce warrior. That's how a lot of them know. She represents a lot more than Oshun as well too. And she carries Oshun's mirror, and she carries the water serpents who were worshipped by the Congolese and the fawn of the Dahomey. And so that's what this chapter basically goes into, and the influence of some of the rebellions and the depictions of some of the different animals like snakes, which we've seen before. On page 86, it says the fact that kidnapped Africans turned to this mermaid figure, mother of the water, Mami Wata, when they crossed the Atlantic, attests to their protest of the disruption of their communities. Right, the ripping apart of their families and the kin networks when they were sold across the waters. And so Mami Wata embodies their protest. Like the other water goddesses, the enslaved knew from their home in Africa that she could be called upon to avenge these horrific social wrongs. That's my laundry. I'm gonna go check my laundry, because my alarm is going off, but this is the chapter. I'll end it here, but that's basically talking about the history of mermaids and how Conjure was rebellion. Okay, so until next time, I'll be back to continue to share some more in solidarity.